Story 1. The Curse of I-80 and the Phantom Rest Stop. Night fell over Interstate 80, I-80, the central artery running across most of the American Midwest. For a long-haul trucker like Elias Thorne, this road wasn't just a job. It was a familiar maze of concrete and asphalt. But tonight, the I-80 stretch cutting through eastern Wyoming held a different appearance. A dense, cold silence, as if the whole world had stopped breathing. A man in his early 30s, with a heavy beard and eyes darkened by sleep deprivation, Elias was fighting an uncontrollable wave of drowsiness. He had been driving for nearly 14 continuous hours, pushing to reach Cheyenne before dawn. His Mack Anthem truck, loaded with valuable electronics, rumbled steadily, but the familiar sound now felt like a deadly lullaby. The clock on the dashboard read 1:47 a.m. "I can't keep this up," Elias muttered, his voice hoarse. His eyelids felt impossibly heavy, and the streaks of light from oncoming traffic began to blur, filling him with intense anxiety. He recalled the company's stern warning: never stop on the highway or at unattended rest areas on desolate stretches after midnight. But he knew he couldn't continue. He had missed the last major truck stop an hour ago. Now only small dim blue signs promised a public rest area within a mile. Although it looked abandoned, it was at least a place to stretch his legs, gulp down a cold coffee from his cooler, and splash ice water on his face. He flipped the signal, and a feeling of excitement mixed with guilt washed over him as the heavy truck pulled off the main lane. The public rest area was tucked deep in an isolated zone, only 200 yards from I-80, yet seemingly belonging to another dimension. It was a vast gravel parking lot, surrounded by dense, dark pine trees bent by the wind. Only one small, dark gray brick building stood, with a single antique high-pressure lamp flickering, casting a sick yellow pool of light onto the ground. Besides Elias's truck, only one other vehicle occupied the lot: an old, moss-green sedan parked in the furthest dark corner, with no lights on. Memories of horror stories on the radio about stalkers at lonely rest stops flashed through his mind. A chilling fear began to crawl up his spine. Elias was normally a pragmatic man, but the silence here was unnatural. It wasn't the usual quiet of the night. It was an absence of sound, as if the air had sucked out every noise. He locked the truck securely, deliberately making a loud click sound with the door lock to chase away the tension. As he stepped down, the icy Wyoming wind hit his face. He turned his back to the truck, heading for the restroom building, and then he heard it. The sound was very subtle, almost lost in the wind whistling through the building's window cracks. A moan. Elias froze. He stood still, holding his breath, listening. The moss-green sedan remained motionless in the darkness. This time, the moaning was clearer, like a faint scratching of fingernails on metal, coming from behind the restroom building. He told himself, "It's just a fox, or some trapped animal." He tried to ignore it and proceeded towards the men's room door. As his hand touched the cold metal doorknob, a whisper, almost imperceptible, echoed right next to his ear, not in the air, but inside his own head. "Don't go in." The voice carried no male or female tone. It was merely a low, vibrating frequency band. A sensation of absolute horror surged, freezing Elias's entire body. He spun around, his heart pounding in his chest. No one. Nothing. Just darkness consuming the pine forest and the old sedan. Elias, with a powerful surge of survival instinct, abandoned his need for the restroom and ran straight back to his truck. He no longer cared about appearing calm or rational. He just wanted to escape this cursed place. But as he placed his hand on the truck door, he heard an engine roar. The moss-green sedan. Its headlights flared, blinding Elias and making him squint. And from the driver's seat, a tall, gaunt shadow emerged. He said nothing, just stood there staring at Elias. But the thing that truly made Elias paralyzed with fear was, he didn't open the car door. The driver's side window was fully lowered, and he had slithered out of it bizarrely, like a spider. He wore dark, shapeless clothes, and under the pale, high-pressure lamp, his face was featureless, merely a deep shadow. Elias didn't think twice. He yanked the truck door open, jumped inside, locked the door, and started the engine. The Mack roared in anger, shattering the unholy silence. He slammed the accelerator, rocketing the truck out of the lot, through the exit, and merging onto I-80 without checking his rearview mirror. He felt joy at escaping, but it was short-lived. Only a few seconds later, the blinding headlights of the green sedan appeared in his mirror. It was following. Elias tried to maintain composure. Just some maniac, he reassured himself. He'll give up soon. He floored the pedal, the heavy truck accelerating to 85 mph, far exceeding the speed limit. But the moss green sedan seemed unaffected by gravity or air resistance. It stuck close, glued to his tail, always maintaining a distance of mere feet from the back of his truck. Then, the driver began his move. He flashed his headlights frantically, not as a warning, but like an epileptic seizure of light. Then the green sedan started weaving violently from left to right, pressing close to Elias's truck, trying to force him to brake hard. "You son of a bitch!" Elias screamed in the cabin. He was consumed by extreme fury and fear. This was no longer a road game, just like the horrifying scenarios he'd heard. The driver intentionally ran parallel, only an arm's length from Elias's cab. Elias looked through the left window. Through the dim light, he saw the driver was still the same tall, grotesque shadow. He wasn't looking around. He stared straight ahead, but his wide, wicked grin, a smile devoid of joy, devoid of life, was starkly visible. And then the shadow raised his hand. His hand was long, bony, gripping something solid. Not a gun, not a knife, but a traffic sign. He slammed the sign hard against the side of the Mac. Crash! The horrible, sharp noise echoed through the sealed space of the cabin. The warped metal was torn open, leaving a long, gruesome scratch on the truck's body. The truck wobbled. Elias gripped the steering wheel, his back drenched in sweat. Elias knew that if the figure continued, he would lose control and flip the truck. He had to do something now. He saw a sign ahead. The next exit was a secondary federal route, leading to Glen Rio, an infamous ghost town on the New Mexico and Texas border, known for stories of trapped souls. "Fine, you bastard," Elias gritted his teeth. "If you want to play, I'll take you somewhere with no light left." Elias signaled and began changing lanes. He sped up, overtook the green sedan, and then, with a decisive turn of the wheel, he violently steered into the off-ramp, dragging the pursuing maniac behind him. The magnificent I-80 faded behind, giving way to absolute darkness and the narrow, jagged side road, heading straight toward the haunted town of Glen Rio. The midnight hunt had just begun. Story 2. The Phantom of Old Route 66. The exit from I-80 led Elias Thorne onto a narrow side road, a jagged surface of rock and cracked asphalt, a remnant of the legendary Route 66 that was now forgotten and swallowed by the dark. Not a single street lamp provided light. This was the land between New Mexico and Texas, where the high desert seemed to hold its breath, leaving only cold winds, carrying dust and unspeakable whispers. Elias gripped the steering wheel, fighting to keep the truck from swerving into potholes that could tear his tires apart. His fear had transmuted into a frantic excitement, the adrenaline-fueled desperation of the hunted fighting back. "If you want bad roads, I'll give you bad roads," he roared, his voice cracking in the cabin. In his rearview mirror, the headlights of the moss-green sedan were still blazing bright. It followed with unnatural ease. Elias's heavy Mac Anthem struggled with the sharp curves and broken surface, but the other car seemed to glide on water. It didn't bounce, nor did it emit any engine noise other than the high-pitched screech of its tires as it pursued. Defying the physical limits of an old car, Elias realized the terrible truth. The pursuer was not a person trying to kill him. It was an entity toying with him. He stared into the night ahead, the tall, jagged silhouettes of the yucca plants and colossal cacti lining the road. Under his headlights looked like demons raising their arms. Anxiety choked him, but he couldn't stop. Suddenly, the green sedan accelerated. It shot up on the right, pressing close to the truck. Elias felt his breath hitch. What was it trying to do now? The car window remained down. The driver, that tall, thin shadow, leaned out again. This time he seemed larger, broader shouldered. He wasn't holding a sign. Instead, his long, pale, bony hand reached out, touching the body of Elias's truck. The moment that hand made contact with the metal, Elias felt a cold, sickening electric current run up his spine, through the seat and the steering wheel, as if his very spirit was being touched by something filthy. And then, the impossible happened. The thick metal of the trailer's rear panel buckled inward under the power of that hand, as if it were made of thin aluminum. The metal screeched in pain. "He is not human." Elias let out a cry, a sound of absolute horror. He slammed the gas pedal to the floor, trying to escape the entity's reach. He risked a sharp turn to the left, using the truck's weight to force the green sedan away. The Mac Anthem's engine roared in protest. The green car was finally pushed back, but not by the collision. It simply recoiled gently, then surged forward again, sticking to the truck's tail, flashing its headlights mockingly. After 5 minutes of maniacal high-speed pursuit on the death road, Elias saw a faint light ahead. It wasn't the light of life, but the spectral glow of a place forgotten by time. Glen Rio, the ghost town straddling the border of 2 states, a silent witness to Route 66's golden years. In the truck's headlights, the remnants of civilization appeared. The Zenith Motel sign with rusted neon, the letter Z missing. The Texaco gas station with fuel pumps dry for decades. The Little Juarez Cafe with shattered windows, gaping like empty eyes. Everything was pitch black, a skeletal remains buried beneath the dark desert sky. Elias slowed down. He had reached his destination. He steered the truck onto the town's cracked main street, past the cafe, and stopped in the dusty lot of the abandoned gas station. He was panting, despair etched on his face, cold sweat streaming down his forehead. He turned off the engine. The silence instantly returned, thicker, deeper than on I-80. The moss-green sedan also stopped. It parked diagonally in the opposite darkness, headlights still shining directly at the truck's nose, like a predator savoring the moment before the pounce. Elias couldn't see the driver through the blinding glare. He decided to act. Better to face death than to wait. He reached for his heaviest wrench, a cold block of iron that offered a false sense of comfort. He opened the door, and the smell of dust, sand, and a putrid, moldy odor like rotting flesh assailed him. The driver had gotten out. The entity stood in the middle of the road, on the boundary between the headlight beam and the shadows. He was terrifyingly tall, gaunt, his limbs long and spindly. His dark clothes did not conceal the fact that his body seemed boneless. He moved like a puppet with cut strings. The most horrific thing, Elias couldn't see any facial features. He wore a heavy, old-brimmed hat, and from beneath the brim there was no chin, no nose, no eyes, just a deep black cavity where light was entirely swallowed. The entity began to walk. Its footsteps made no sound. Elias, paralyzed by fear but driven by survival instinct, raised the wrench in a defensive posture. "What do you want?" Elias tried to shout, but his voice was only a weak, raspy whisper. The black shadow stopped. The deep black cavity under the hat brim seemed to peer right through him, and then from that hollow a voice spoke. Not a human voice, but a dry, grating hiss, like hundreds of crushed crickets, yet every word was distinct in an old, deep American accent. "You stopped at my station, driver. Now you will be a part of the road." At the same moment, from the shattered windows of the Little Juarez Cafe, from the dark rooms of the Zenith Motel, sounds began to erupt. Not moans, but horrifying applause, clapping, chilling cheers, like an invisible audience rejoicing at the horror show about to begin. Elias looked around in absolute panic. He wasn't just facing the entity before him, but the entire haunted town. The entity raised its hand, and this time it clutched another object, a bunch of old, mud-caked truck keys dangling in the air. "Let me drive your last haul." Story 3. The audience of death and the cursed Key Elias stood there, the heavy wrench in his hand, unable to move. His face was soaked in sweat. His eyes were glued to the abyssal black cavity beneath the entity's hat brim. The chilling applause and cheering from the ruins of the Zenith Motel and the Little Juarez Cafe grew louder and louder. Not human sounds, but a gruesome symphony of bone rattling and rusted metal hissing. These were the invisible audience of Glen Rio, souls trapped on old Route 66, victims who had once lost their way and become part of the road itself. "You stopped at my station, driver. Now you will be a part of the road." The entity's dry, grating hiss repeated. He held the bunch of keys high. Elias stared at them. They were the keys to an old truck, attached to a worn brass keyring, engraved with the letters WK. A chilling truth flashed in Elias's mind. These were the keys of the Western trucker who died here before him. The entity began to advance. Each step, though silent, echoed in Elias's heart like a battle drum. Horror and desperation wrestled within him. "You won't take me," Elias roared. He lunged, swinging the wrench like an axe, but the figure was faster. Impossibly fast. The black shadow slid sideways with an absurd speed. The wrench merely tore through the air, and then the entity's long, pale, bony hand shot out, grabbing Elias's arm. It wasn't a physical grip, but a feeling of bone-chilling, paralyzing coldness that permeated him. It wasn't just cold. It was the sensation of having his life, his hope, and his will sucked out. Elias's fear reached the climax of surrender. He felt a dark energy pulling him forward. "You will drive for me on roads without a tomorrow." In that very moment, a spark ignited in Elias's mind. He remembered tales of highway entities. They needed the victim's consent or resignation. He remembered the story of the truck that avoided disaster through a reckless decision. Reckless excitement flared in his despair. He had to break this connection. He screamed, not in fear, but in fury and will to survive. He dropped the wrench, using all his remaining strength to rip his arm free from the entity's grasp. His skin stung, a sensation like being burned by ice. He backed away, staring at the black hollow. "You want my route? You want my truck? But you won't have it." Elias turned his back and ran, not towards his truck. He knew the entity would wait for him there, but towards the ruins of the abandoned Texaco gas station. The figure did not pursue immediately. The black shadow stood there, seemingly surprised by Elias's deviation from the script. Elias rushed into the darkness of the gas station, past the rusted pumps. He found what he needed, an old, empty oil drum. He kicked the drum hard, creating a terrible, deafening clang in the ghost town silence. The sound interrupted the cheering of the spirits, and then with a mad gesture he ran toward his truck. The entity had realized his intent. It turned, beginning to slide toward him with terrifying speed. Elias jumped into the cabin, ignoring the locks. He cranked the engine and the Mac anthem roared. He didn't drive out of town. He drove the massive truck straight toward the old moss green sedan. The car that had chased him all night. The car of death. He slammed the accelerator, a joyful yet chaotic sense of impending resolution washing over him. Crash! The 40-ton truck collided head-on with the moss-green sedan. The impact was not normal metal on metal. It was the screeching shriek of thousands of trapped souls. The sedan's headlights instantly went dark. Elias didn't stop. He pressed the gas again, plowing the sedan deep into the crumbling brick wall of the little Juarez Cafe. The second collision created a tremor. The whole ghost town of Glen Rio seemed to shake. Elias looked in his rearview mirror. The moss-green sedan had vanished beneath the debris, leaving only a streak of black oil. And most importantly, the thin black shadow was gone. The cheering of the invisible audience also ceased. Only silence remained. Elias Thorne, the brave driver, had won, but at a high cost. His whole body trembled uncontrollably. He had survived. He took a deep breath, the smell of oil, dust, and putrid flesh still lingering. He started the engine and slowly he drove the dented truck back towards I-80. Behind him, the ghost town of Glen Rio returned to a silent ruin, with only the whispers of the desert wind remaining. Elias knew that on the endless road of the West, there would always be rest stops that should never be entered, and cursed drivers doomed to drive forever in the dark. He had passed through the gates of hell and returned. But there was one thing he would never forget: the abyssal black cavity beneath the hat brim.